From Uber finding drivers to your nearest location to auto-completing your sentence in that important mail you are sending for a job application, data structures are everywhere. Hello everyone and welcome to this detailed video on data structures in Java. You are watching your favorite Simplilearn YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to us and like this video. In the amazing world of internet, data structure rule the way we get through our day-to-day tasks. Data structures are useful almost everywhere, right from your food ordering app to rendering graphics on your PC while you are playing that important Fortnite tournament. In this video, we will cover all the important data structures that are there to know, from arrays to trees to graphs, in detailed manner. Discussing the inner workings of these data structures, to their space and time complexity, to implementing them in real time using Java. These data structures are one of the most important sections in a software engineer's interview in top product companies including Google, Meta, Adobe, and over a dozen of others. So make sure to watch this video till the end, comment how you like this video, and subscribe to our channel to never miss any tech videos from us. So let's get started. Just a quick info for you. If you want to upskill yourself, master coding and software development skills, and land your dream job or grow in your career, then you must explore Simplilearn's cohort of various software development programs. Simplilearn offers various certification and postgraduate programs in collaboration with some of the world's leading universities like Caltech, IIT Kanpur, IIT Madras, and many more. Through our courses, you will gain work-ready experience in skills like full stack, MERN development, RESTful API, design, backend development, cloud deployment, and DevOps, and over a dozen of others. That's not all. You'll also get the opportunity to work on multiple projects and learn from industry experts working in top-tier product companies and academians from top universities. After completing these courses, thousands of learners have transitioned into software developer role as a fresher or moved on to a higher paying job and profile. So if you are passionate about making your career in the field, then make sure to check out the link in the pinned comments and description box to find software development program that fits your experience and areas of interest.
So as I described earlier, that array is basically a container which can store values or a sequence of values or sequence of numbers or sequence of characters into itself. We can think of it as a box which can store all the values in a continuous fashion. As you can see here, this is just a pictorial representation, and this is coming from the official Java docs. And you can see that if we create an array of size 10, then we have these 10 blocks created here. You can see 1 to 10th. So the whole length of boxes, the number of boxes here are 10. But the way arrays are designed is that the index is basically used to access the element in this particular box. The index of the boxes start from 0. So it goes from 0 to 9. So remember, the array length is 10. The array can contain 10 elements, but the index of the array starts with 0 and will always end at length minus 1, which is 10 minus 1 in this case, which comes as 9. So it will always be length minus 1. It will always the index will always start from 0 and go till length minus 1. Length can be anything. In this case, the length is 10, so the index ends at 9. If the length was 20, the last index will be 19. But in total, you have these 10 memory locations. We also call them as continuous memory locations because they are continuously placed. An array basically blocks 10 memory locations and creates a container over it. So this is how an array basically looks like inside the memory. And whenever you want to access the elements of the array, you will say array of 0 or array of 1 or array of 2. You basically need to specify the index to access the element at index. For example, if you want to access the element which is sitting in this box, you need to say array of index 8. And we'll see how we can do that. But this is the basic understanding and idea of the concept of arrays. So let's try to understand this with the help of an example. I will switch back to Eclipse IDE, and I've created a very simple program here to demonstrate the functionality of arrays here. So we already covered in the previous lecture of what is package and what is public and what is class. How do we give the class name and what is the meaning of this particular method? So I'm not going to cover that again. We'll start directly from here. So here the first thing which I'm doing is I'm declaring an array of integer. This is a variable name, the identifier basically. It can be anything. And this is the data type. It's an integer array, and as we covered this as well, that whenever you put square bracket in front of a data type, it becomes an array data type. So this is an integer array representation. Now we just declared an array, but we still haven't allocated a size to it. So you can do that with this particular syntax. So you can put the variable name of the array and say new int and put the right size here. This size can be anything. And once you do this, now array will actually allocate those memory boxes which we covered here. The moment you do new int 10, these boxes, continuous boxes, will be placed in the memory, and the memory is allocated to this array. We call this memory allocation. This is how you allocate memory to the array. So we allocated memory to this array for storing 10 integers. The next thing is now we can start storing elements in those boxes. So like I said, that the array index always starts with 0. So if you have to store the first element, you actually have to store it at index 0 location. So you give the array name, you provide these square brackets, and you put the index value within the square brackets. That is how you basically point to a particular element inside the array. So we say an array of 0 and we put the value 100. Then we initialize the second element, which will be index 1. Then will be the third element, which will be index 2. Fourth element, index 3. Fifth element, index 4. Sixth element, index 5, and so on. Until we store till the last element. So this is the 10th element, which is accessible as index 9, and the value is 1000 basically. So from 100 to 1000, we stored 10 values in this array, and we stored them by accessing the index, and this is actually the only way you can store values in the array, by pointing to the indexes. So we go from 0 to 9 and we stored all the values, 0 being the first element and array of 9 being the last and the 10th element. Remember the length minus 1 concept. Okay, so now we will try to print all the elements one by one. That's pretty much what we are doing now. So as we covered in the previous lecture, that we use system.out.println to print anything, and we understood the whole meaning of this, so I'm not going to repeat that. Now we want to print the first element. The first element is sitting at index 0, and we can access that element with this syntax by providing the variable name and the actual index value. So I'm just writing a random string here which says element at index 0, and then I'm putting this plus here and putting the variable name. This plus is basically used to concatenate the output of a static string with a random variable, or basically you can print anything with using plus. Plus is used for concatenation. So I'm just trying to print this whole value, but here this is a string value which is a static string, and then I have a value coming from the array. So whenever you have to print some value from a particular data type or variable or collection, then you can use this plus syntax to concatenate a string, static string, with your actual value. So that's what I've done here by saying plus and array 0. And similarly for index 1, I'm printing the first index, then for 2, 3, so far and so on so forth till the index 9. So basically I'm just printing all the values of the array starting from index 0 to index 9. So that's all which is written in this program. Now let's try to run this program. So I will right click, go to run as, and go to Java application and hit on this. And now if I just expand this console, you can see all the system.out.println statements have been executed and they printed this. So this is the static string part, in fact including the colon. This is the static string part, element and index 0, printing exactly as is, and then dynamically the 0th index element of an array is printed here. Similarly, we have printed the index 1 location element, index 2 location element, index 3 location element, and so on so forth till the index 9 location element. So in total these are the 10 elements, but the index always works from 0 to length minus 1. In this case it will be going from 0 to 9. So this is basically all which I wanted to cover in this lecture. The whole idea was to give you more understanding of arrays, and remember this is just an integer array. You can similarly create a character array. You can also create a string array for you as well. So it's completely related to the data type you are using. If you create a char array, then you can only store characters into it. If you create a string array, then you can only store strings into it. And now you can probably relate back to this particular thing which I explained in the previous lecture, that we create this string array for the reason that when you run this particular program, and if you want to provide any command line values, command line arguments to the program, those arguments will automatically be stored in this args, and then you can access this as args of 0, args of 1, etc. in your program. That's the whole concept. Let's get started with understanding arrays in detail. We have been talking about arrays throughout this course of Java in the previous sessions as well, and we have covered some basic understanding of how to create arrays, how to declare them, how to fill values in the array, and how do we print the array with positions as well as the array as whole. But whatever examples which we took previously were one-dimensional arrays, because arrays can have more than one dimensions as well. You can create a one-dimensional array, you can create a two-dimensional array, you can create even a three-dimensional array, and you can go up to as many dimensions as you can handle in your Java program. So it depends upon the kind of complexity you want to have in your program and the kind of values, the kind of structure you are going to store in your arrays. And based on that need, you can choose whether you want to use a 1D array or one-dimensional array or a 2D array or a 3D array and so on. In these sessions, we are going to talk about 1D arrays, 2D arrays, and 3D arrays. And after that, we'll leave up to you to try out more dimensionals if you want to. We have already covered the basic array structures, which were one-dimensional arrays. So I will just give you a quick walkthrough of how we actually handled one-dimensional arrays. So this is a sample program to demonstrate one-dimensional arrays. If you remember, this is how we used to create arrays. We write the data type of the array, and then we write the square boxes, which denote that this is an integer array data type. We assign a variable to this, and then we initialize the array with the size 4. So new is the keyword which is used to initialize anything in Java, and we are going to use this heavily when we talk about classes and objects and even collections. Literally any object which you want to create in Java requires a new keyword. So here I'm writing new and then int 4, which means create an array of size 4. And then I'm filling the value of the 4 positions which I have created as part of this array. And if you remember, when we create these kind of arrays, we store them in a 0 index based position. The first value gets stored at 0th index position and then so on and so forth. So it will always start from 0 and never start from 1. Remember that. And after that, we just print all the values of individual positions of the elements in the array. And if I just run this program, all of the elements of this particular array should be printed one by one. So if I just show the full console of the output, you can see that element at index 0 was 10, element at index 1 was 20, element at index 2 was 30, and element at index 3 was 40. So this was just a quick refresher of how one-dimensional arrays can be written. And whenever you declare a very simplistic array, it will generally be a one-dimensional array. Now let's look at the two-dimensional arrays and how do we write them, when do we need them. For that, I have created another example, which says two-dimensional array. I just created a class and it has a public static void main method, and I've created a two-dimensional array this time. So let's understand this two-dimensional array in a bit detail. And when do we need that? Generally, you would need to use two-dimensional arrays whenever you are trying to do any matrix calculations. If you understand what do you mean by matrix, it's basically a 2 by 2 structure which stores the values in the form of rows and columns. So imagine a table of 2 rows and 2 columns, then it will be a 2 by 2 matrix. So if you want to store that particular table in a Java program, you would need to store that as a matrix, as a two-dimensional matrix, rows being the one-dimensional and column being the other dimension. And that's what we are doing here. And if you want to store that 2D matrix in a Java program, the approach and the procedure for it is pretty similar to how you create a one-dimensional array with slight changes. The first change is instead of a single square bracket, you're going to write 2 square brackets because it is a two-dimensional array. So remember, the number of square brackets you are going to put while initializing and declaring the array is the number of dimensions which your array is going to have. Since this is a two-dimensional array example, that's why you see 2 brackets here. If this was a three-dimensional array example, you will see three square brackets here, and so on and so forth. So that's the first part of it. Second part to understand is to how to store the data. Remember, I told you always imagine the structure of rows and columns whenever you are trying to store a two-dimensional array in Java. So what are rows and what are values, and how do you represent them while you declare and initialize a two-dimensional array? So you start with the curly braces as a normal 1D array, but inside the curly braces, you create nested curly braces blocks. You can see three blocks here. They start with their own curly brace and end with their own. Then this curly brace starts here and ends here. And then this curly brace starts here and ends here. Idea is that you provide this outer curly braces to define the overall structure. And then inside each of the curly braces is going to represent a row in your two-dimensional array. So each of these values, these blocks, is going to represent a row. So I can say that this is the first row, this is the second row, and this is the third row. And if I try to visualize it in terms of columns, then this is the first row, first column, first row, second column, first row, third column. Similarly, second row, first column, second row, second column, second row, third column, and third row, first column, third row, second column, and third row, third column. So individual values are going to be represented as columns, and the whole curly braces is going to be represented as arrays. That's the basic mental idea or mental image you should have while declaring a two-dimensional arrays. Remember to declare the rows inside the nested curly braces, and whatever elements you have will automatically be indexed as columns. Another thing to remember that since this is an array data structure, everything starts from 0 and nothing starts from 1. So this will be row 0, this will be row 1, and this will be row 2. I'm talking about the position. We can still call it as first row, second row, and third row, but the position of this particular row element is 0. The position of this particular row element is 1, and this particular row element is 2. Similarly, for column as well, this is column 0, column 1, and column 2. Similarly, column 0, column 1, and column 2, and so on and so forth. Once you understand this data structure well, and you have defined it correctly, then everything should fall in place. If you want to do a matrix addition, or if you want to do a matrix multiplication or a dot product, all of the kind of calculations can be performed using the 2D array concept. Here in this program, what I'm doing is I am printing the values of this particular 2D array into a matrix style. And you see some strange code here, which is for etc. Don't worry about this. I'm going to cover in detail what this for means and how do you write this. For now, what we can understand that we just want to print this. You might not need to print this in your Java programs when you write a production grade application, but you might want to do manipulations on these arrays as metrics. Maybe you want to create a transpose of a matrix, or you want to do a dot product or addition or subtraction or whatever be your use case. In this case, just for demonstration purpose, I'm printing the values as rows and columns, nothing else. So this all of this code from line 8 to line 14, or in fact line 13, is just showing how to print the values. You can see some system.out, and you can see some construct here. And like I said, don't worry about this. I will cover this in detail. Let's run this program and see if my Java array is stored correctly and how can I represent this. So you can see I have represented it in a style of a 2D matrix, where this is the first row, this is the second row, and this is the third row. Similarly, this is the first column containing the value 237. So column 0 will have value 2, and column 1 will have this value 3, and column 2 will have this value 7 for row 0. Let me also do something here which can help you understand this concept better. Let me do a system.out.println, and let's print an individual value, because like I said, the for loop can be confusing here to understand. So let's say I want to print ARR of 0th row, first column, and see what kind of values do we get. Let me comment this code. Comment is control \, and this code will be commented, and this code will not be executed. And now only line 15 will be executed instead of the for block. So if I run this, I get the value 7. So row 0 and first column. Row 0, first column is 7. Let's try with 1, 1. I want to print the row at one position. Remember, not the first row, but the one position row, which is basically technically the second row. So second row, second column, and see what kind of value do I get in this case. I get 6. So second row, second column. Similarly, if you change this value to 2, then third row, second column, which should point to 4. Yes, we get 4. Similarly, you can write a value here as 0, and you can write a value here as, let's say, 2. This will print the 0th row and the second column. So similarly, whatever kind of value you want to write, you want to access, you can access it in this fashion. And remember, the column and row indexes will always start from 0. So this is a simple demonstration of how you can use two-dimensional arrays. And in this session, we also did a refresher of one-dimensional array. Let's get started with how to create and use a three-dimensional array, or how to go about using multi-dimensional arrays in Java. So as you can see from this image, we talked about 1D array, which is having just one axis. Then we talked about 2D arrays in the last session, where we had rows and columns, basically an x-axis and a y-axis. And then we can also have a 3D array, which will have three axes, which will have an x-axis, a y-axis, and also a z-axis. Think of a simple box, which every box in this world will always have at least 3 dimensions. And from here, you can go even build more complex arrays, which can have 4 dimensions or 5 dimensions or as many dimensions as you want it to have. And today we are going to look at an example of how can we build a 3D array and how do we access those elements. But this picture is just to show you the mental model of when you will be creating a 3D array. So for example, generally an image data is stored in 3 dimensions. So you might want to store the image data into a 3D array. And there can be many other use cases in the mathematical and research computational use cases where you might want to use a 3D array. So, but remember, there's an x-axis, there's a y-axis, and then there is a third axis, which is called the z-axis. So let us look at a Java program to understand how we can build a three-dimensional array. And for that, I have created this class, which is called multi-dimensional array. It has a entry point method, which is the public static void main method. And then I have created an integer array. And this time, instead of 1 or 2 square brackets, I have 3 square brackets. And if you remember, I mentioned this in the previous session as well. The number of square brackets which you're going to put while initializing the array is the number of dimensions of the array. And since in this particular program, I'm going to demonstrate a three-dimensional array, that's why you see 3 square boxes. Let me just minimize this. Yep. So we have 3 square boxes here, and we have created the variable name as ARR, or short form as array. Then we start with the outermost curly braces as is. Then we put another curly braces which starts from here and it ends here. Then another set of curly brace which starts from here and end here. So this is the first dimension. This is the second dimensions, and these are the third dimensions. That's how you're going to define the different dimensions. Remember, this is the first dimension when the first curly brace starts. Then you have this second dimension, which covers this hole and this hole. And then you have third dimension, which are these. So that's how you're going to visualize and put the 3 dimensions in use while declaring a 3-dimensional array. And the values work in the same fashion. It's a 0 index based position. So since we do not have an official name for the third dimension, so I'm just going to use x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis to refer to the 3 axes. So this would be x of 0, this would be y of 0, and this would be z of 0. Similarly, x of 1, y of 1, and z of 1, and so on and so forth. So now if I try to access the value which is at 0th x position, first y position, and second z position, what's the value do we get here? Let's run this program and understand and interpret the output. Okay, so when we ran this program, we got the output as 11. So let's understand this output. So when we say the 0th position on x, the first position on y, and the second position on z. So this is the 0th position on X, and this is the first position on Y, and then this element is 0, 1, 2 is the second position on the Z axis. So to describe it in a nutshell, this defines the X axis. So we have two elements on the X axis here, this one and this one. Then we have two elements on the Y axis on each X axis. So this is 1, this is 2 on the first X axis, and this is 1 and this is 2 on the second X axis. So 2X and 2Y. And then on the Z axis, I have three elements each. So hope this helps you understand and visualize this. So X axis, and this one is other X axis, and then Y axis, and then elements inside this are Z axis. So I'm saying 0th X axis in this block, first on the Y axis, which is this block, and then second element or the Z or second position element on this particular axis in this particular block, which is 11. And that's why we get 11. If I print 0, let's say I change this particular value as 1. So now the output should be coming from this side. So second X position, because it's 1, second Y position, so this will go here, and then the 2 position, which is the third element of the Z axis, which is 13. So let's see if we get 13. Yes, we get 13 here. So this is just to show you how you can interpret this particular array, and always be mindful of how you are structuring this array. If your structure is gone wrong, then your program will become useless and it will give you a lot of unpredictable outputs which might not make sense and which may introduce errors in your program. So be very careful how you define the structure of the elements here. That's the key. And after that, you just need to understand the X-axis, the Y-axis, and the Z-axis. Always remember all the axes start from 0. So when I say 2, I'm basically referring to the third element and not the second element. So this is all I wanted to cover in this particular session, where we describe how we can use a 3-dimensional array. And from here, you can go to any lengths. Like I said, you can add more square brackets here and go to 4-dimension or 5-dimension or 6-dimension. But remember, the more dimensions you add, the more complexity of the program will be having. The program will become more and more difficult to debug and understand. So always try to take a wise call as to how many dimensions you want to use in your array.
Let's see what strings are and how we can use strings in Java. Java strings are objects that contains groups of characters. Like arrays, strings are immutable as well. Immutable means once string is created, they cannot be changed or manipulated. If we use a string hello, they are stored in a memory location like this. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 are the addresses of the locations where each character of the string is stored. Now let's move on to creating strings. There are two methods of creating string literal method and using new operator. This is the syntax of string on the screen. First, string type, then variable name is equal to sequence of characters in double quotes. This is called as string literal method. For new operator method, we use new operator and value of string is given in the brackets. Now let's see a simple program to understand the use of strings with Java code. Let's create a new project. File, new, project, next, tick the box, next. I'm gonna name it as strings, and for the base package I'm gonna name it as string as well, because all the programs I'm gonna do in this package for strings. We have our main program right here, the main class. Now before importing the strings, we need to import some pre-processive directives. So for this I'm gonna import java.io input output dot star. Star means everything inside the directive. And I'm gonna import java.lang dot star. This means I can do all the operations that is needed for strings. So there are two ways to declare string. This is the first one. String s is equal to Simplilearn. Now we have a string s and it contains the value Simplilearn. Now I'm gonna print this system.out.println plus s, or I'm gonna name it as string. I'll print string first is equal to, and then I'm gonna print this. So double quotes string is equal to and plus s. So let's run this program, and there we go. we have string is equal to Simplilearn. So it took the value of s and printed that. So let's see the next type of string, how we can declare the string. Str is equal to new string Simplilearn. So this is the second method how we can declare a string or assign the values to string. So to print it, I'm going to use string2 is equal to and then plus str. So let's execute this as well. And as you can see, we have string2 is equal to Simplilearn as well. So this means both the methods are to declare strings or to assign values to the strings. So you can use any of them. I prefer using first, so it's easy. That's why you don't need to write new and string. So let's move on to the new topic, classes and strings. We all know that strings are immutable. Now what if we want to change something inside the string? Then we use these methods to manipulate strings in Java. First one is string builder. The string builder in Java represents a mutable sequence of characters. It is an alternative to string class as it creates a mutable sequence of characters. Next is string buffer. String represents fixed length immutable characters of sequences, while string buffer represents growable and writable character sequences. It will automatically grow to make room for additions like appending, inserting, and deleting. Next, we have string tokenizer. A string tokenizer object internally maintains a current position within the string to be tokenized. Some operations advance this current position past the characters processed. String tokenizer class in Java is used to break a string into tokens. A token is returned by taking a substring of the string that was used to create the string tokenizer object. Now, let's see different methods for functions that can be done on strings in Java. We have a lot of methods or functions in strings. These are few of the methods that are used by programmers frequently and we will be using in this series of our Java tutorial. Next, let's have a look at a program where we are going to reverse a string and compare to string. This is going to be an interesting program and you will be able to understand string a lot better. So let's get started. So first we'll see how to compare two strings and then we'll see how to reverse a string. So let's create a new project. File, new project. Let's click on next, tick the box, next. I'm going to rename it as compare and reverse because I'm going to do both the programs in the same program. And we have our main function here. To use some classes or to use some methods, we need to import some of the strings from Java. So I'm going to import strings dot compare dot string compare. So let's write our code here. So I'm going to use 4 strings. First string s1 is equal to, then I'm going to use new string and inside it I'm going to name the string as Simplilearn, S capital. And for the next string, string s2 is equal to new string. Let's give it as practice. For the third string, s3, new string, let's give it as study. And for the fourth string, we are going to match the third string to show all the outputs that's possible. Study. Now we are going to display some output using the function equals. So what equals does is it compare two strings. So first I'm going to make it as user friendly by writing comparing string 1 and then comparing string 2 and then semicolon, so that everything will be separated. You can easily find out what the result will be. And then this is the main part, s1 dot equals and in the bracket s2. Because we are comparing s1 and s2, so s1 dot equals s2. So this function automatically checks whether s1 is equal to s2. Now same thing we are going to do with string s3 and string s4. Again this user friendly, s3 and s4 semicolon s3 dot equals s4. We know that s1 is not equal to s2, but s3 is definitely equal to s4. So let's try it with one more sentence so that we can compare one more string. So I'm gonna compare s1 and s4. So I'll copy paste it and instead of s3 I'll write s1 and same I'll do with s1 dot equals s4. So let's run this program. Oh, before running we have an error here. So I'm going to delete that import because we have not used it. So now let's run the program, and yes, we have a result. Comparing Simplilearn and practice is false. That's definitely false. Study and study, both strings are matching, so it's true. And Simplilearn and study, they don't match. That's why it's false. So let's get started with our second program, that's reversing a string. So I'm going to delete everything from here and I'm going to write same code here only. So first I need to assign a variable of string input equals, I'll name it as Simplilearn. And this is the main part, guys. We use string builder. Because the string is immutable, as we discussed earlier, string builder allows us to do manipulation. So I'll use one more variable, input1, and new string builder. So in input1 we can do any manipulation that we require. So first I'm gonna do input1 dot append, so that I can do operations that I want on it, either reversing or deleting or concat. So I'll take append of input, and lastly input1 is equal to input1 dot reverse. This function reverses the string that is there in input1. Now to print the value of the reverse string is, and then input1. So here's the catch, guys. We have to use string builder so that we can do manipulations inside the string. If we don't use string builder, then we will get an error that unable to manipulate the string or unable to reverse the string. So string builder is the main thing here, so that we can do all the operations that we want, either reversing or concat or deleting anything from the string, or deleting an element or adding anything to the string. So all that happens because of string builder. So now let's run this program. And there we go. We have a result. The reverse string is the reverse of Simplilearn. Now let's try it with something that is palindrome. So we have our language Malayalam. If we reverse this, we'll get Malayalam. So this is kind of palindrome string, and see the result. Our reverse string is also Malayalam. So this is how you reverse a string. So this brings us to the end of this video. We learnt about strings, the functions for strings, and the methods we use in strings. And lastly, we learned how to compare two strings and how to reverse two strings. Welcome to this tutorial on objects and classes in Java. This is a part of our Java tutorial series where we will be covering everything you need to know to master Java. Let us look at what we will cover today. First, we will talk about objects, and we will implement two programs on IntelliJ to learn about objects. Then we will move on to classes in Java, where we will see an advanced program to learn classes more in depth. So what are objects? An object is an instance of a class. Let's have a look at an example. In this example, animal is a class and dog is its object. The object dog has states and behaviors. We can have dogs with different breeds, sizes, and colors. These are considered as the states of object dog. On behavior side, dog has behavior like barking, eating, and wagging tail. So an object has its own states and behaviors. Now let's look at an example using Java code. There are many platforms to run Java program. So for this video, I'll be using IntelliJ. So let's create a new project. Let's name it as project1 and finish. There we go. We have a new project. We have a class with main, and we have a main function. So the code that we write should always be written in the main function. So let's create a new class to understand how the object is used. Let's name it as student. We need variables so that we can access the variables of this class. So I'm going to use student ID with the integer type, student name, and student's age. There we go. Now we have these three variables that we can use. So let's go to our main program and start our coding. So we have a class named student. Now let's see how to create an object of a class. This is the syntax to create an object. Now the object here is S. I created an object S of class student. Now let's assign values to the variables. For this, we use the object S and use the dot operator, and we have options from which we can choose from that we declared in the class student. So for this, I'll use ID and give a value. Similarly, I'll give age and give a value. And finally, let's give a name. Now we'll print its value. Now we are going to run this program. Let's see what output we'll get. And there it is. We have name, that's Simplilearn, we have age, and we have ID. Now let us see an example how we can use multiple objects for a single class. So let's get started. Let's create a new project and I'm going to name it as vehicles. Because I'm going to use cars and bikes in this program, so I'm going to use vehicles as a combined form. And yes, here we have a class main and a function main. Now I need two classes for this program. So I'm going to create two classes. First I'm going to name it as bikes, and the second class I'm going to name it as cars. So let's create variables for these classes. So in cars, first I need string, name, and I need the cost of the car. So cost can be integer as well, because I'm going to use $sign in that. So I'm going to use string because of that. So same thing I'm going to do with bikes. Now that our classes are created, let's create objects for this class. So the process is same, but we are going to use different names for the object. First, the car class, and I'm going to name as car1. And yes, we have created the first object. Now to create the second object, similarly, I'm going to create 5 objects of the class cars. And I'm going to change the name for them. So I created 5 objects of the same class. So I'm going to create 5 objects of the bikes class as well. So bike one will be a bit longer. So I'm going to use B1 till B5. And I'm going to name them from B1 to B5. So now I'm going to assign values to the variables that I created in classes bike and cars. So first I'm going to go with cars and let's name it as Lamborghini. Similarly, car2, Ferrari. So I'm going to use names of the cars that are very famous and costly so that anyone over the world can understand this. So let's name car 3. I'm going to name it as Bugatti. Similarly, car 4, Pagani, and car 5. Now I'm going to give names for bikes. I hope everyone will understand the names that I give. B4 and B5, the last one, Yamaha. Now let's assign the cost for bikes and cars as well. So the procedure is same. So let's do it 130,000. Same B2. So B1 goes for Harley Davidson, B2 for Ducati, B3 for Suzuki, B4 for Ecos, and B5 for Yamaha. I am going to assign values for these values accordingly. For Ducati, $232,000. For Suzuki, 200,000. 300,000. And the last one, Yamaha, 500,000. Now similarly, I'm going to assign values for car1.cost till car5.cost. $203,000 for Lambo. I think I can copy paste these as well. So let's copy paste. It will be a lot faster and easier to do. Car 2, car 3, car 4 and car 5. We don't need this. As per car 2, let's take it as 252,000 and let's make it as 3 million. As per this, let's keep it as 1,400,000 and lastly let's take it as 293. Now that we have assigned all the values for all this, now let's print it and get the value. I'm going to create a very simple program but a very user-friendly program. So it's going to be interesting for you guys. So we are going to ask the users what would they like, either bikes or cars. So we need to give them the options, and our next program will be based on the options that the users select, not the options we give as the command. So let's do it. Let's give the options 1 bikes and 2 cars. I need to take the value that user gives. For this, I'm going to write this command. So I have not used scanner yet. So let's import scanner. And let's create an object for scanner. And yes, let's get back. So the data type of choice variable is integer. That's why I'm using next int. If the data type was string, then I would have used next line. So now that we have choice from the user, let's use this value. If the user chooses the first value, that means bikes. So the next thing we display is we have models, and we are going to give 5 models for bikes to the user. Here I am giving options to the users so that they can choose easily from number 1 to 5. Now we can show these options to the users so that they can choose from one of these values. So let's use one more if statement so that we can find out whether they have this value or not. Before that, I'm going to ask which one would you like to choose. To enter the choice, I'm going to use one more variable. Let's say n. So I'm going to store n. If n is equal to 1, that means Harley Davidson. Then I'm going to show the cost of Harley Davidson. This is the syntax to print the value for the cost or any of the variable that we use in class. What if the user says second or third or fourth or fifth? So for that, we are going to use else if statements. If n is 2, that means Ducati. So we have to show the rate of Ducati or the cost of Ducati to the user. Now similarly, I'm going to do for n is equal to 3, n is equal to 4, and n is equal to 5. Now I'm going to do for n is equal to 4. And lastly, n is equal to 5. That is our last bike, Yamaha. What if the users put a number that is not between 1 to 5? So for that, I'm going to use else statement and put a message that please enter the value from 1 and 5. So now we have code for the bikes, and the same thing, what if the user selects that he wants to find the car? So for that we have this, the choice is equal to 1. So the same thing we are going to do for choice is equal to 2. And the same thing we are going to tell to user that we have 5 models. The same names that I gave to variables, I'm going to give this to here. Second one Ferrari, third Bugatti, fourth Ecos, and the last one Porsche. Now we are going to ask the users their choice, that which number do they want to choose. Now we need one more value so that we can have it as a variable which can store the choice of the user. So for this I'm going to use C. Now if C is equal to 1, that means if the user wants to see the cost of Lamborghini, that he puts the choice as 1. So we're going to display this message, the cost of Lamborghini. And we are going to use else if loop to enter the next values for C from 1 to 5. If C is equal to 2, that means the user wants to know the rate of Ferrari, then we are going to show the cost of the Ferrari. Same thing if the user enters 3 as the choice. If user enters 4 as the choice, then we go for ECOS. And the last one, if user enters the choice as 5, then we have to display the cost of Porsche. Now what if the user enters none of the values from 1 to 5? Then we have to display a message showing that please enter the value between 1 to 5. Now remember the first choice that we wanted from user to enter either bikes or cars. So what if the user do not enter either 1 or 2? So for that we need one more else function to tell the user that either enter 1 or 2. And with this we have completed our code. So now let's run this program. For this we need to go to run and then run main. There's a shortcut for it, that is shift plus F10. So let's run the program. And yes, we have successfully executed the program. Let's test this program now. So enter your choice. I'm going to enter 1. And yeah, we have 5 models: Harley Davidson, Ducati, Suzuki, Pagani and Yamaha. So enter your choice. I'm going to enter 1. And yeah, we have our result. The cost of Harley Davidson is $130,000. So with this, we have completed our code. And please feel free to type this code in your own computer and try out all the permutation and combinations that you can with this program. So with this, let's move on to classes and understand the classes and their concept. Then we'll have a new program on classes. Now let's see what is a class. A class is a blueprint from which objects are created. A class describes state or behavior of an object. In this example, dog is a class. The variables in this class are breed and color. The functions or methods of the class dog are barking, hungry, and sleeping. We use objects of a class to use variables and functions of the class. With this, let's understand classes with a simple Java code. Let's create a new project. Next, tick the box and let's name it as automobiles. Let the base package be student. And yes, we have a class main. Now let's create some classes to do code on. I'll create a new Java class as cars. And then I'll create one more class with the name bikes. And then one more class, automobiles. So I'm gonna connect cars and bikes with automobiles so that we can use that program in main and see what can we do with the classes that we create. In automobiles, I need some variables. I'll take private, double, and let's say fuel. And then same thing, private, double, and then year. And let's take one more, private, string, and brand. Now let's have getters and setters for this. So these are used to get the value and set the value for the variables inside the class. There we go. We have the getters and setters for it. Now let's go to class cars. So public class cars extends automobiles. So in it, I'm gonna create one more class or a constructor. And I'm gonna print a message. Say a new car has been created. Car has been created. Now the same thing I'm gonna do with bikes. Let's go to bikes and I'm gonna use the same thing, extends automobiles. This is because I can inherit all the variables from the automobiles class. So I created a constructor and I'm gonna print a message. A new bike has been created. So I have created class, cars, bikes and automobiles. So let's go to main program. So this is where we should write our code. So I'm going to start with the code now. It's a very simple code. First I'm going to create the variables or the objects of the class with private bikes, bike. So one is car and one is bike, both are objects for the classes. So I'm going to use these objects. Bikes, bike is equal to new bike. This is so that my object can function really well, and now I'm going to run it. It will take some time to run. And yes, there we go. Our program has executed, and the things that I typed, a new car has been created, a new bike has been created, are done. Now let's try something else using the classes. So I'm going to bikes. So I'm going to create a new method or a new function, public void kick for bike. So I'm going to print message. The bike has been started with kick. Bike has been started with kick. Now the same thing I'm going to do with cars. Now how does a car start? With the key. So I'm going to make a function, public key, and inside it I'm going to print the same message, car has been started with key. Oh, I should write void there to give the return value as void. So let's print the message, car has been started with key rotation. Let's write that as well. So in the main program I'm going to use objects to use those functions, and let's see what changes they'll do to our program. Bike.kick and car.kick. Let's run this. And there we go. First we used to have this two messages, but now these two messages are also there as well, because we invoked those functions and methods that are there in class cars and bikes. So if I write bike.key or car.kick, this won't work. This is because key is not a method of bike or kick is not a method of car. So that's why I gave private static for the functions. So if I execute it, these are the error messages that I'll get. Cannot find the symbol method kick or method key.
Thank you for joining us on this comprehensive exploration of data structures in Java on the Simplilearn YouTube channel. We trust this tutorial has enriched your understanding of crucial data structures from arrays to trees and graphs. If you find this content valuable, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Data structures play a pivotal role in the tech landscape, impacting everything from apps to gaming experience. Your feedback is important, so share your thoughts in the comment section below. Stay tuned for more tech insights and remember to subscribe for the latest updates.
Staying ahead in your career requires...
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.